Welcome to Janet Today, Janet Tomorrow, Janet Forever, the Janet Jackson podcast where two cousins discuss all things Janet Jackson. Today, we are going to talk about Janet Jackson's Control, celebrating the 35th anniversary of Janet Jackson's landmark album. My name is Courtney, and I'm here with my cousin.
Cousin Kam, and my Control is 35.
35 looks good on Control, I'm telling you.
It does.
Now, we've talked about several singles. So if you hear our podcast from the past, you know we've talked about The Pleasure Principle more than once. We had the great pleasure of talking with Barry Lather about The Pleasure Principle. We've done...
What have you done for me
lately?
Yep. Control itself.
Control itself. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited to talk about this album today. We are recording. Today is Friday, February 5th, 2021, 2 days before
Super Bowl Sunday, which has turned into Janet Jackson Appreciation Day.
Yes, recognized as Janet Jackson Appreciation Day by those in the know. I love that this has carried on. I think what is now 4 years? And I just love it. Like, for one, I love that like Janet Jackson fans will just grab onto something and never let it go.
That's right.
I love that for us. And also, I just love, like, I hope that she looks forward to it, like, you know, the day before the Super Bowl. Whereas in the past, she may have been answering or dodging questions about her Super Bowl appearances and will she appear? Won't she appear? All of this. Like, we do this every year, it seems like. And now I hope that we've kind of flipped that and made it kind of a positive, happy experience for her as we just celebrate the legacy of Janet Jackson and all she's given us. You got your memes and your picks ready?
I'm trying, but you know, it's also as much as I love sticking it to the NFL, it's also where I put in all my prop bets for the Super Bowl. So
you're the worst.
Hey, in the words of Jay-Z, I'm a hustler, homie.
Oh, he's the worst too.
Well, so yeah, and this happens every year. I watch it and tell you what happened with the halftime show, and you go, I didn't miss nothing.
I totally forgot about it. Like, I just didn't even think about it. I was watching Poetic Justice.
I want to, every time you mention that movie, I want to go, why?
Me too. Why? I don't know why.
But go ahead and grab your movie. I'll watch Why Did I Get Married 1 and 2.
Now that's all you, player.
Hey, I ain't gonna lie. I could watch some Tyler Perry movies, so I'm good. I represent on that side. But yeah, it's just, you know, the NFL it's their biggest day, and we turn it into Janet's biggest day. It's like, it's your anniversary, girl.
Right?
Get ready.
Absolutely.
And I mean, not only are the fans happy about Janet Appreciation Day, but man, Rock Hall, MTV, Amazon Music, they all are showing love to this classic Control album. Even, you know, just recognizing the anniversary, which I must say is well overdue. So Absolutely. Shout out to them for recognizing the Queen.
Yes. I'm not going to go there with the Rock Hall right now because we're in a festive mood. But I did appreciate just seeing the recognition. And I don't know what that means, though, because it seemed like every outlet was talking about Janet Control 35. And even Janet tweeted in recognition of the album, which is something that she rarely does. So it feels kind of like a coordinated campaign almost. So I'm wondering if there was some work done on her end, you know, PR publicity to kind of push that forward, or was this organic? Either way, I don't care, because I would appreciate it if they put some effort into celebrating for her milestones, but also it would be equally as fun if it just sprang up and some of these outlets, like, you know, everybody, I'm telling you, like Spotify Music and Pandora Music. I saw tweets from everybody, from Billboard Music, just showing love to Control and 35 and to Janet Jackson, most especially. And, you know, I'm one who's like, I don't usually care about an album's birthday, but I do get excited when it's Janet and when people are excited. Just, again, we will find any reason to celebrate her. So I appreciate that.
Speaking of Control, can you name all 9 tracks on the Control album?
Let's give it a go.
Okay.
All right, you gotta keep me honest. So obviously, Control, Nasty. What have you done for me lately? When I think of you,
So in love.
you can be mine. Let's wait a while. He doesn't even know I'm alive.
Oh.
I feel like I'm missing some. Funny how time flies.
Oh,
Wait, I didn't say my favorite.
I'm just gonna say you didn't say your favorite.
Pleasure Principle is my baby. And I'm so sorry to the principle of pleasure that I did not remember.
I thought that was going to be your first one.
I should have led with that one because that would have really kept me straight. But I was trying to remember them in order. And see, Pleasure Principle was the first song on the B side. I think I should have known that. Should have known that.
Okay. I don't even want to know. Now I ain't gonna ask you what side of the album that you got them. I can usually name 7 with no hesitation. So let's talk about Control. John McCain, he was the A&R executive of A&M Records. He decided to team Janet with the wonderful producers Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. Also, want to give a shout out to Jelly Bean because he deserves a little prop too.
It's true, yes.
But they were the core of coming up with Control. Some people think Control is like her first album, but it's actually her 3rd studio album. 3rd time was definitely the charm in this case.
Yeah, the story of how Control became Control is super fascinating to me. So we know that Control was released in February 4th, 1986 on A&M Records. And by April 19th, 1986, it had peaked at number 1 on the Billboard 100. And we know we're going to talk about all the records that it set. But I think that there's a couple things we have to highlight right off the beginning. So Kam, you said this is the first meeting of Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis, and Janet Jackson. And really, it was John McClain who put them together. It's weird talking about John McClain because if you are a Michael Jackson fan, I think you have a very different relationship with that name. As he is one of the partners that currently managing the estate, which
I was hoping we didn't. Yes. I thought we would just go roll through that.
I can't just ignore it. I can't just ignore it. I think we have to just call it out, call a spade a spade, which there's a complicated history with John McClain and the Jackson family. But we do have to give credit where credit is due. And in 1986, there was a lot of credit due. Right. Basically, John McClain had just gotten to A&M, I think in 1984. And Janet Jackson was really and I think because of the relationship with the family, he was really instrumental in I'm going to say salvaging her career because at this point, A&M was really just running out the clock because the first 2 albums had not done exceedingly well. And they didn't think they had anything, which is hilarious to me.
Yeah.
It's Janet Jackson, figure it out. And I'm saying that even not knowing what Janet Jackson would become, just knowing Penny and Girl on Fame and all those things, that's who that was. You already had recognition, family name recognition, but her individual recognition from all of her TV projects, figure it out. But John McClain came on and basically had decided okay, this is the 3rd album. We're going to do something special. And so I think we talked about this during the Control pod, but Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis essentially picked Janet Jackson. They had been brought there to A&M to work with another artist. So they had done some work with the Silvers, which is their connection, I think, to John McClain. But they had been brought there to work with another female artist. And basically, she had turned down every song that they had offered. And so when that happened, I think they were kind of just given a pick of the A&M roster. Okay. And they chose Janet Jackson.
Right. And I think it's interesting that Jimmy Jam, in an interview with the Red Bull Music Academy, he says nobody was checking for Janet at this point. Right.
I
know it's hard to believe, but they had pretty much was we don't know what to do with her.
Yeah.
But they felt like she had a great voice and they felt like they could take her talent and make something happen. And what I love about Jimmy and Terry is they actually took their time to get to know Janet, hear her out, to find out what her vision was, what she wanted with this next project. And I really, truly feel, although I don't have no proof, I do feel like this was the first time that someone came to Janet and said, hey, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's what she was looking for because, she herself talks a little bit about, she talks about, I wanted to do it differently than being handed a piece of paper and told, here, sing this, which is what had been done in the past. And, she said she wanted to express herself. And Jimmy and Terry really were the first to help her do that.
And it shows.
It absolutely
really
shows.
Does.
It showed. And I think, too, when we talk about control and we talk about really the trajectory of Janet Jackson's career, one, it doesn't happen without control. Like, it just doesn't happen. If they keep plodding along the way that those first two albums have been produced, and I don't want to trip because it's still some bops on those first two albums. Like, there's songs on there that I really just go up for.
Let me say this, barely. Barely bop.
Listen, I'm going to say this. The Renee and Angela songs are bops. And a singular Marlon song is a bop.
Okay.
But I will say, if she doesn't do control, then the career doesn't happen. Number one, I think A&M drops her. That's point blank. But number two, I think what they found with kind of treating each of these albums as like the diary of her last 2 years, that formula was cemented then. And that's the formula that carried them. And if we are honest, the albums for Janet Jackson that have gotten off the rails, that have produced only 2 or 3, maybe 4 bop, are those albums where she departed from that construct of, this is my heart, this is my diary, this is my life.
Right.
And that was created then. Control did that.
Right. And let me just say that to me started a trend with other artists working with producers to where they were like, you know what? I want to talk about what's going on in my life. And you can't tell me other artists didn't look at this and go, look, Jimmy and Terry did this for Janet. Can we use that same formula? And now you get people who do, like, for instance, Usher's Confession. Him and Jermaine had a talk and they just used their experiences and bam, you had this mega CD called Confessions. So it, to me, laid a blueprint to how a lot of people were incorporating what was going on in their lives and putting it on music.
Yeah.
To me.
I think you're right. I hadn't really considered it beyond her. But definitely it began the difference between like people just singing songs like, the Motown way, where you got a group of writers and they write a bunch of songs and then they test them on different artists and the best one gets it.
Yep.
And this wasn't that. This was, we're going to handcraft these songs with you. And we know, like, early on and during the Control days, it wasn't as much as like they were sitting down with a yellow notepad together. It was more like ideation, but even that transpired. And I think if Control didn't happen the way it happened, I don't think we would have gotten songwriter Janet. Now, that's not to say she didn't write songs before, because we know she had credits on LaToya Jackson's albums. And so she was already writing. But I think it was the meeting with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis that kind of freed that other part of her as well.
Yeah. And one more thing I want to add too is I think that contributed to this album with Jimmy and Terry was they took her out of sunny California,
right,
and brought her to a place, brought her to cold Minnesota.
Well, was it cold though? I thought they recorded in the summer.
I would say it's cold because I know every time I see that city,
cold in Minnesota.
It's always cold. I mean, I'm just saying, but I do think they took her out of her element, away from everybody. Pack your bags, come here. Let's talk. Let's get to know each other. And I think that gave her the freedom of, hey, I can be myself. I can write my feelings down and I can just be me. And I think that also is a little bit of a secret formula too for Control.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on. The location change was instrumental in the production of this album. And I like that Jimmy, when he talks about it, and I think it might have been that same interview, it might have been Red Bull. He talks about the very first time that they were wanting to record. I guess Janet wanted to stay in LA and like use the studios she was familiar with and, sleep in her own bed. And basically they were like, no. And Jimmy's words were, it had to be on our turf with no bodyguards. He said no Star Trips and none of the Joe Jackson's people hanging around making suggestions, which I get it, right? And I also love Janet's retort. I think it was in Rolling Stone magazine where she's they're discussing this, and she says, like, they told me they didn't want me to have somebody doing everything for me, and I told them that wasn't how I lived anyhow. So like, like, excuse you.
But and I think man, come on now. She would have recorded this in her own little compound in California. I don't think we would have got the same control. Because I could see people bobbing their head into about, I don't think that's how we're supposed to do it. Yeah. So sometimes you gotta let me come to my place. Let me come to my kitchen. Let me show you what my formula is.
Yeah. And I think it was really important too, because not only was she out of her element, but it wasn't, this was literally like she had just fired her dad as her manager. Right. And so John McClane was her new manager. She had basically parted ways with her brothers because, they did a pretty extensive amount of writing on the previous album. And so this was, I think it would have been awkward, to say the least, to have all of those abrupt changes in your musical career and still try to have that musical career in the house where all these other people are in the house. And so just for that reason, I think that this was probably a very wise move for them to insist that she come. But also, too, she got to have experiences that contributed to the album. So we know Nasty is one of those songs that was born of her experiences being out in Minneapolis. Right. So I think that just that experience of being on her own and like really having the space and out of your routine, because, sometimes like you just need to be out of the things you are every day responsible for to really have a time to be introspective and reflect on like your experiences. Sometimes it's just like go. And you don't even realize like what I've been through, what I survived, what I achieved, because you didn't take a break to think about it. And so I think just having those conversations away from all of that, having those conversations with Jimmy and Terry. And then also she was accompanied by her best friend. So how fun is that?
Yeah. Girls trip.
There's so many good things about this album that to me are so important in launching the career of Janet Jackson. And I know people say like, it feels like this is her first album. And again, I feel like this one doesn't happen without those other two. And I feel like those other two, they were obligations. I think the success of Control is what cemented for her that like, I kind of like this. I could be a pop star. I think if Control didn't pop, Janet was done.
I don't know now. Now, one thing about the Jackson family, now they don't let nothing stop them. If they feel like they can put out good music, they're going to keep putting out music.
I agree with you on that point, but I don't think that's what she wanted. I don't think she wanted it until she had a taste of success and was like, oh, this is fun.
Okay.
Prior to that, I think in her mind, and I think she's even said it, that if it didn't work, she was just going to go to school. She was going to study business law. What if she would have became like an entertainment lawyer?
And would have saved Michael a lot of money.
Probably.
Like, I know a couple times Mike was like, I wish you would have took your butt to law school, trying to one up me, you should have took it to law school, but that's all right.
Yes. She was a lawyer. I'm convinced. But I think that if this didn't pop, this was done.
But I also think that's the determination of her to make this pop, because number one, she left her comfort zone. She, trusted Jimmy and Terry with her emotional with her stories. And then they technically recorded this in 6 weeks, but 2 of them was them just getting to know each other. So really 4 weeks, and they brought out 9 tracks, and they were blazing tracks. So I think that also makes you go, imagine if on those other projects, if someone would have heard her voice, then we would be saying the other projects were bops too.
Yeah, I agree. And let's talk about that for a second, because that's another one of my things where, like, if this doesn't happen, we don't get Control. So we talked a little bit about John McClain and him kind of creating this magical trio in the production sphere, but also at A&M at that time was the director of Black music promotion, which is, yes, that was an actual title.
Mm-hmm.
His name was Jesus Garber. And I think some people might know that name because he was actually a special guest of Janet Jackson at the Rock Hall of Fame. And that tells me that she really recognized him as kind of a person who helped to really launch her and propel her career. And there's so much about him that I kind of dig as far as like how he worked in making sure that Control had a fighting chance. But I'll just say a couple things. One of them is, if you think about it, those previous albums, Janet Jackson and and Dream Street, they only sold about 200,000 copies each. To put that in perspective, Control sold 250,000 copies in its first week.
Right.
And I'm sure they've sold more in that time. But at the time that Control was launched, and the reason why that's important is because the record company, A&M, didn't really have an incentive to do any heavy promotion because, again, the first two albums just hadn't done well. And to me, part of that was them. Part of it was the song selection. But there were some songs out there that could have been massive hits. And I don't know that the dollars were put into her career at that point. And that brings me to Jesus, because Jesus had basically championed, he had lobbied for Janet Jackson. And so what he was saying is that, 200,000 units isn't usually cause for a record label to sink a lot of money in promotion for the next album. Mm-hmm. And what happened was he had come to the studio and John McClain had played like just it was unmastered, but he had played all the tracks for him. And like, he's at the studio, it's like 8 or so at night. And he's like, they listen to him. And he's like, next thing you know, it's like 1. And so they're like, let's get out of here. We got to go home. And he's like, then he's in the car at 1:30 and he's still listening to it. And then somehow at 4 or 4:30, one of them calls the other John, calls Jesus, or Jesus calls John. And they're like still amped about this like rough track. They're like super excited about what they're hearing. And at 8 a.m., they're already talking to like strategy, like how we're going to market this. But the big thing was how do we get A&M to do any promotion when, the first two have not done so well. And so he really stood on the tables and yelled. I don't know. He doesn't seem like a stand on the table, yell kind of guy, but he just said, listen, trust me. I've heard the material. He was convincing them that she could do promotion. They weren't sure. They didn't know if okay, we send her out there. Is she going to talk to people? She seems pretty shy. Like, what's going to happen? Promote this album. For the other albums, I think basically she had gone to some schools and sang in some gymnasiums because she was a part of like this stay in school thing. That was a part of her promotion and she was going to schools. But they were like, okay, so you're saying you want to send her to radio stations in urban cities and we're just going to see how it goes? And he's like, no, trust me, she can do this. I know she can. I know the material is hot. All we got to do is get her out there. And so he got them to commit to a 1-year promotional deal where she did a 13 city promotional tour. And it was mostly like radio stations and some clubs and things like that. Shopping malls, you sign autographs and those types of things. And he's so funny because he said, they were so worried, she wouldn't talk to anybody. And he's like, when she steps into a building, if they're fans, he's like, she's a politician. The lights come on and she's shaking hands and kissing babies.
Showtime.
Yeah. And he's like, he's relieved because he's like, man, I had told him she could do it. So if he doesn't do that, and what's funny is he had basically said, I want this young Black woman to have the same effort and promotion as we're doing for Bryan Adams. And I barely remember Bryan Adams. I only remember one Bryan Adams song.
And it wasn't from 1986.
Yeah, I feel like it was from 93 or 95. But if you look at the charts at that time, Bryan Adams, even though he didn't have a lot of number ones, he had enough hits-ish to kind of just stay super relevant. And he was moving units. And I remember, I think he had moved from an album, he had moved something like 2 million of the album that they had done that year-long promotion. And Jesus is like, Janet can sell 3 million. This is not even, he's like 3 to 5 million is, I'm telling you, like he was selling
He
it.
was selling it. He was selling he was selling sugar to the cake.
Right, sugar to the cane.
I'm already sweet. No, but this right here is sweeter.
He was working it, okay? And so that's
But
kind of one of those turning points where I'm like, if this doesn't happen, we don't get Janet Jackson. And so I think that, when we think about Control, and it's just a darn good album. But there's so many things that had to go so right.
like you needed Jimmy, Terry, Jelly Bean, John, and Jesus. Jesus, is that how you say his name? Yeah. So you need a salesperson, two good producers, a good musician, and an agent that believes in you.
Yes.
And another interesting twist, as if the story couldn't even get any crazier. Jimmy and Terry engineer quit on them before recording began, so they actually had to engineer the sound themselves.
But that's another thing. The fact that he quit allowed Jimmy and Terry, not allowed because they didn't know any better, but basically recorded everything too loud. So everything was distorted, but it really gave that album that edge, that that feeling of like, this is almost off the rails. And it wasn't intentional. They were doing the best they could. And I'm glad they did the best they could because it's banging.
I mean, sometimes you just have to learn stuff on the fly, and that's what they had to do. Some of the tracks that Janet recorded for Control were rejected by the ex Atlanta Star lead singer Sharon. She was like, she don't want these, so you can't let them go to waste.
And this album kind of, I think, shook the industry, and everybody was running out looking for their next Janet Jackson, and they still looking.
Yeah.
But I think she opened the door, and we got a wave of Black women artists who would not have been given the chance if it were not for the success of Control.
Right. And one person comes to mind, Paula Abdul.
Well, absolutely.
And then I remember Karen White. A lot of people don't know, came through here. Pebbles came in right after that. And it was like everybody was producing their version of a Black female pop star. And some were good. Some didn't last as long as Janet. And some faltered to the end. But you're right on that point. I mean, I totally agree that every record labels were now trying to find them the next Janet.
Yeah. And I think another important thing, Jesus is my man. Another important thing that Jesus did, which really opened it up for a lot of Black women artists, they had a plan. And it sounds crazy. Like, their plan was to go to the Black radio stations, do their promotions, get enough buzz that they can start kind of demanding that these pop stations, I'm using pop in quotations because for whatever reason back then and currently pop means white. But their idea was, we're going to start on the Black stations, but we're going to build such a buzz that we're going to cross over to the pop stations, with the idea of not only are we going to cross over to the pop stations, but that buzz is going to carry over into TV, and we're going to have her video, like Janet's image will be everywhere. That was their goal. Like, her image will be everywhere. And they had a whole plan of how they were going to get onto video stations and get onto MTV. And if you think about it, Janet was the first Black woman that you can recall, maybe you can recall another, that you would consistently see on MTV. And it was because they had a literal strategy. Like, they wrote it down that this is what they were going to do. And a lot of MTV at the time, there was a quote, and I can't remember the name of the guy, but let me tell you, if you read too many quotes from like the 80s, probably to like 95 from MTV, my Lord, everything they said was kind of crazy racist. Like, every executive just was like partially crazy racist. But this guy basically said, like, we ain't really wasn't looking for no Black ladies, but she was making such a buzz, and she did have the Jackson name. So we just kind of like pushed it in there on like the fringe hours. And then it just was, people were requesting it and just demanding. And that's how she got kind of to be in such heavy rotation. But they were like, we only tried it because it just had such a buzz and she had the Jackson name. So like 2 a.m., here you go. And then he kept saying like, it's because our audience was really expecting rock. And so there just really wasn't a space for that type of music. And I was like, oh, okay, I hear you.
Yeah, but
right.
Yeah, okay. We gonna. This is for the Janet Appreciation Day. We're gonna keep it light.
Fortunately for him, I can't remember his name right now, but I remember that nonsensical statement.
And that's a good thing. That's a good thing at this point. But I do love this quote from Jimmy Jam where he was mentioning that they wanted to do an album that would be in every black home in America. And they were actually pushing for one of the best black albums of all time. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad that she was on MTV, but I just remember seeing her on Soul Train performing What Have You Done For Me Lately. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's when I really was like, oh, that's that lady that sings that song that I see on BET all the time. And that's really when I was like, okay, I would start really like putting it together that Janet was a star, you know? And I think that's why I love that fact that they really went to the black stations and was like, hey, this is our superstar. This is going to be your superstar. This, and it worked because she did cross over and she's been untouchable since.
The level of pop stardom that Janet achieved because of kind of the springboard of Control was unheard of at the time, because this is pre-cell phone, pre-internet, pre all the things, the luxuries that people have now, pre-streaming, all the luxuries that people have now. Like in 1 week, 250,000 people left their homes to buy her album.
It's true. And I mean, cassettes hadn't even really taken off at this time. So you had to go physically.
This was cassette time. This was album cassette time. I feel like Walkmans was like 83, 84.
83. So it might have been on cassettes. But yeah, you had to physically go to a store. Or you had to try to record it off of your radio and hope that the DJ didn't talk through half of the song.
I was the expert. I could get you a whole album. And you could basically get Janet's whole album because it was 7 singles. Let's talk about the songs a little bit. So
okay,
obviously there was 7 songs from this album that were released as singles in 1986, spanning all the way into 1987. And again, that was part of the strategy. We're going to do a full year of promotion on this album. What's your favorite song on the album?
Let's Wait a While. It really made me appreciate the powerfulness of a ballad. I love the message. I think Janet at this time, although I was only 6 or maybe 7 when the song came out, it was really letting me know I ain't got to rush. I think it was a beautiful way of saying self-worth, self-love. But I just love her voice, the melodies, it was just pure soul. As much as I love Control, Nasty, What Have You Done For Me Lately, I still go back to this right here. Let's Wait a While.
That's fair. We already know my song, so I don't think I need to go into it. The Principle is maybe the greatest song in existence. And I love it so much with my whole heart. Don't ask me any words because I don't know them. But it's still the greatest song.
I know.
In the world. So I love that song. But, I do have a strong appreciation for Let's Wait a While for a host of reasons, many of the ones you named. But what I like about Let's Wait a While is that it is on the same album as Funny How Time Flies.
Which is a gem.
She was already telling us, like, you don't have to be this or that. You can be your whole self and you can bring, different parts of you and different experiences with different people. Now, I appreciate that she was like.
Now, since we're talking about singles, I can't think of another artist that has two songs from one project or era, or however we want to put it, that really def- define them. Because you have Nasty, where, everybody go, it's Janet, Miss Jackson, if you're nasty.
Yeah, seriously,
But
35 years later, people are, that still comes up in pop culture, social media. Anybody's name who's Jackson is going to hear it.
Yes. And then you have Control, where everybody always, especially rappers, female rappers, I'm in control like Janet. Damn it. Two songs.
Yeah.
I for one album that goes with Janet. I mean, I can't think of another artist who has that combination.
So we talked about Pleasure Principle, the best song in the whole wide world. Funny How Time Flies, Let's Wait a While, Control. When I Think of You is the song that when they took the tracks, and they played them for Janet's brothers, that's the song that they earmarked as, that's going to be the number one. I would have never guessed that in my whole life.
It's catchy. I could see why they felt like it was the Janet.
Yeah. The only song on this project, so I feel like all these songs, like people give You Can Be Mine a hard time. And I think it's You Can Be Mine and He Doesn't Even Know I'm Alive are the only two songs where Jimmy and Terry, Janet, nope, none of them did any writing. I'm sorry, that's not correct. The Pleasure Principle and He Doesn't Even Know I'm Alive are the two songs that Jimmy and Terry, Janet, they didn't do any writing on.
Okay.
And to me, He Doesn't Know I'm Alive. I love that song. But to me, that song is the misfit on this project. I feel like it belongs on the album before. This could have been a Dream Street bop. It feels young compared to the other songs.
I call it a filler song. Maybe it was just a song that, hey, let's just put it out there for people who still want to hear something from the old Janet.
Maybe. Yeah, but to me, it just feels like if it didn't fit what they crafted, that one was kind of the eyeball.
Oh, yeah. And
I still like it. Like, I like it. It's a fine song.
I can't say that. I'm just going to say,
All right. Now let's talk about Control's accolades.
It's plenty of them. But first, let me just break it out with this. Youngest artist since Stevie Wonder to reach number one on the Billboard 200. We talking about Janet. Janet and Michael become the first siblings to reach number one on the Billboard 200 and Billboard Hot 100. First female album to produce top five Billboard Hot 100 singles. First female to produce 6 top 20 Billboard Hot 100 singles. First album to produce 5 number one Billboard R&B singles. Top female pop album of 1987. Top R&B female for 2 years in a row. She had 86 and 87 on lock. And 14 million worldwide units sold. And we're talking about albums.
You know what? I think if I work there, if she recertified, I think it's got to be close to 16, 17 million now. I mean, with the reissue of the Control vinyl and just with streaming, I feel like it's time to do it, Miss Jackson.
Janet probably like, man, I'm cool. I ain't got no more to prove to y'all.
I feel like she doesn't care. And I normally wouldn't care, but I do think it's important for a host of reasons. Number one, because of the drastic attempts to erase her, like some of these things can't be erased. But I also think it is important because as time marches on and as we won't always be here to tell the story. And so those types of records and those types of things exist and can tell the story in our absence, in her absence. I do think it's important for those reasons.
But I mean, she has Janet Appreciation Day. We don't do it. We good.
Fan-made videos are so good.
Some people have put some content out there that I'm just like, dude, like, did you go to art school? Do you got like a master's in this?
Yeah.
What is like, creativity?
It's some serious talent. It's some serious talent. Yeah, and I appreciate that because these fans are just putting their heart into these video productions, dance routines. Amy is doing amazing things with her graphic designs, and it's just like it's serious talent in the Jam fam. And I think that can't be understated as to how the Jam fam works to keep Janet's name in the light.
Right.
And, it's an honor to do that because she deserves it. But I just think it can't be overlooked. Like a lot of the work, even younger fans, like a lot of the younger fans are doing a lot to introduce Janet to younger fans. And it's just happening organically. And so I think that that's really cool. I want to talk about, so we talked about some of the accolades. I want to just make sure before we get out of here, we say a couple things. So we talked about all the songs she had on the chart. So we had Control at number 5. When I Think of You went to number 1. Nasty peaked at number 3. What Have You Done for Me Lately peaked at number 4. Let's Wait a While was number 2, but on the Hot 100, and then peaked at number 1 on the R&B chart. So she was everywhere. She literally had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the Hot 100, and she was up for like all kinds of awards. Like she set some records with her award nominations, particularly I think the American Music Awards held the record for the most nominations from one album. She had 12 for Control, and she ended up having 4 wins from that album, but 12 nominations. The Grammys is where a little bit gets stuck in my craw. A little bit. Because in general, Janet has been nominated 26 times and she's won 5 times only. And 3 of those were for videos. Just disrespectful to the album. The videos were great and should have won, but there should also have been some recognition for the great albums that she put out, especially when we're reading all of the barriers she broke and the record she set with these albums. And then the Grammys just paid her dust. In fact, the 1986 Grammys really kind of upset me because Jimmy and Jam and Terry Lewis won for Producer of the Year, which they absolutely deserve. They won Producer of the Year. But then Album of the Year went to Paul Simon, Graceland.
This Paul Simon. How they gonna tell Paul Simon no?
What's interesting is Paul Simon was also nominated in the Producer category, and they were like, nah. We got to give them something, though.
That's how it works. I'm for real. I have a whole theory on it, but that's another show.
Yes. So Janet was nominated, and it was 86 was tough for Black women, okay? So let me tell you who was in the category. So she was nominated Best R&B Vocal Performance in that category with Aretha Franklin for Jumper Jack Flash, Chaka Khan, Destiny, Patti LaBelle, Winter and You, and Anita Baker's Rapture. Come on now.
Everybody named Mama.
Anita Baker stayed at home, and I ain't never gonna be mad. It should have been 2 that year because Janet deserved something for all of the records that she broke with this album that no one else broke with their albums in 1986. But I ain't never gonna be Baker. I don't care.
And you know what? I'm thinking, looking here, and I'm saying Best R&B and Best Rhythm and Blues Song, and she got beat out again by Anita Baker. With Sweet Love. I can't even look. Sweet Love is
listen. So yeah, that category was tight. Prince and the Revolution with Kiss.
Remind me to tell you a funny story about the song Kiss.
Oh, okay, no problem. And then Billboard. So we should talk about the Billboard Award. So like she was racking up. I like Billboard because there is a method to the madness. It's not just like some folks get mailed a secret ballot and then they write down their friend's name and send it back. But there's a method to the madness. Like, how did your record perform on the radio? And even though that can be twisted because, you might only get to play Black radio. But points are assigned for different things. And basically they total your points. And that's how they decide who wins these awards. And so Janet Jackson ended up getting 6 awards in 1986 for the Billboard Awards. And actually, there's an article in the Chicago Tribune. This article was written in like January 1987. And they were like, basically, the shock was that Janet Jackson did not win that year for Best Pop, for Top Pop Artist. And that award went to Whitney Houston. And Whitney Houston also had 6 awards that year from Billboard. So they were tied at 6, but just the way that the points are assigned based on how many albums you sold, radio stations you're on, did your album stay for a long time, or did you shoot to the top and fall? All of these things matter. And so just the way that the points fell out, even though they were tied with 6 apiece, Whitney was number 1 and Janet was number 8.
Yeah. But that's the power of Clyde Davis.
Listen,
That was a
Clyde
big
was working,
machine.
okay? Clyde.
Yeah.
I ain't gonna
Yeah.
be mad. He convinced
But
us to listen to Alicia Keys for at least 4 years. So I ain't.
but the little machine that could at A&M did they thing with
They
Janet.
did it, okay? They did it.
It's hard to beat the big machine of Clyde. I've learned that.
Yeah. I think we have to recognize too that it spent on the US R&B charts. Control album was there for 91 weeks. 91 consecutive weeks. This album is listed like in all of the rankings that you hear about. You know, the Rolling Stone Best 100 Albums of the 80s is ranked 28. Vibe 100 Essential Albums of the 20th Century. 100 Women Who Rock the World. Vital Pop 50 Essential Pop Albums. Slant Magazine. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Definitive 200, the top 200 albums of all time. Like, this album is like the Michael Jordan of albums.
Look, at the time,
for every finger.
yeah. Look, at the time, it was the Michael Jordan. It was like, okay, can she take it to another level? But little did we know in the future, she was gonna be that Michael Jordan picture with all 5 rings. Yeah. So this is just the first ring.
One of my favorite quotes was when the album turned 30 and, you know, people were writing a lot of articles, which really says something. There was an article called, "Sorry, Miss Jackson, You're Underrated, Control at 30." And the author, Wesley Morris, offers one of my favorite insights about the album in his critique. And he says, you know, listening to that album 30 years later, it still sounds today as much like 1986 as it does like 2056. And I just think that is the best quote because, you know, one of my favorite things about Janet Jackson is she is never of her time. You know, you might go back and listen to songs by Janet Jackson and think everybody was making music like that. No, everybody was making music like that later. 2 years later, 3 years later. Everybody wasn't making music like that. She was really never of her time until those lost years. The music that she was making with Jimmy and Terry was never of its time.
I'm going to say this right here about Control that I think I really admire about this project before we wrap is that to me, it became a way for, especially for Black women, to start taking control and become like our battle cry. And I think it allowed more record labels to start listening to artists and of course start going to Jimmy and Terry. Of course, I mean, everybody wanted to talk to them and have them produce their artists. So I just think that, you know, it's celebrating 35 years right now. But when we look at 50 years of Control, we'll still be in awe at how powerful of an impact it was when it dropped.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think, too, one of the things we didn't really talk about is, you know, Janet was talking about empowerment, control, and just taking control of her life. But it wasn't just empowerment. It was, you know, women's empowerment, but it was specifically Black women's empowerment. There was a very feminist bent. And I like that it was multicultural, right? So like anybody, I think, could identify with this album. But I think just by the fact that she is Black and she did have to penetrate markets and kind of liberate herself from guardrails that other people put up for her, right? Like even to the point of like, and I'm not just talking about like liberating herself from her family and really taking this step to like take this really first giant leap on her own. But I mean like liberating her from the confines of what the music industry told Black women they could be.
Yeah.
And Janet Jackson said, "No, I will not play the role that you have decided that I will play. I will write my own role."
And pop charts did not see her coming.
That's the truth.
They was not ready for her. And she went on to dominate for decades. For decades, you know, and, you know, in closing, I don't really have a good closing, but I will say like just a testament to how powerfully dominant Control and Janet Jackson were. You know, we were very excited late last year. The Goldbergs, the ABC sitcom, The Goldbergs, did essentially a tribute to Janet Jackson when one of their characters was running for comptroller of their town. And she did an entire routine to Janet Jackson's Control.
and changed it just ever so slightly to be Comptrol. And the fact that that is like still living in the lexicon. And I know that show is from the 80s, and so it rolls back to that time.
And that's one thing about that show is he always focuses on iconic things that happened in his childhood, and Janet was one of them.
Yes. So I love that. I was like, aren't we all waiting for the chance to just pay homage to Janet Jackson?
Oh yeah. I just got to learn how to dance. I don't got too old. But let me jump on the chair and fall down.
Don't do that. I cannot come to you. I cannot heal you through Zoom.
Well, my mission is to get skinny so I can do the if routine, and then I can die happy.
That is so funny. But I feel like you don't need to be skinny to do if. Just go for it.
Not skinny, but in shape.
Okay. Yeah, those are different. Those are different. That is it for us for now. If you need more Janet Jackson, which we know you need more Janet Jackson, you can subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
If you're already a subscriber, please tell a Janet Jackson fan about us and leave us a rating or review whenever you're listening. Your comments and ratings help other people find us, especially on iTunes.
If you're not already, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Janet Jackson Pod. If you are following, thank you for every like and every single retweet, especially on episode releases. Those are simple things you can do, and they go a long way to help us reach new Janet Jackson fans.
Our intro and outro music, Good For You, is provided by THBD and is licensed under the Creative Commons 3.0 license.
Thanks for listening to Janet Today, Janet Tomorrow, Janet Forever.
What are we recording?
I just wanted to do a pickup because you know how yesterday I kept saying I wasn't going to go into no negative space. And then this morning in the shower, I was like, there's some things that must be said. So,
oh, God. All right. Look, before we record this, does this have to be said?
These are things that must be said.
What you gonna say before what you gonna say so I can be prepared?
Oh, I'm just gonna go off of where we talked about, like, you know, the black charts and all of these different things. I just have some things to say about that.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna let you get it off your chest. I don't know why.
I'm gonna try to keep it short, but you know, these things that must be said, especially because I just been on. I think recently it's been bothering me more so because I'm seeing it more often, and that really is that there are a lot of Janet Jackson fans, some black but mostly non-black, who seem to go to great lengths to minimize or in some cases completely ignore the impact of Janet's blackness or Janet's womanhood on her career. And to that, I have to say, like, you should listen to Justin Timberlake because
are you recording?
Wait, let me make sure.
Let's start recording because you finna go into it.
I'm recording. Okay.
All right, let's go.
Yeah, you should listen to Justin Timberlake because you want black music, you want black culture without the blackness. Like, you might as well listen to J. Tim. That's his specialty. But for people, and especially fans, like, it's irritating when the general public does it, but it's especially irritating when professed fans of Janet Jackson do it. You know, and to act like she didn't have to work harder to become a megastar than, like, let's just say that a white person was born in the exact same circumstances. A white person was born to a Jackson family who happened to also be white.
So you're saying let's say Maria Osborne.
Right.
That's close.
Exactly. The Osmonds. Okay. Let's just say that you mean to tell me that you believe in your heart of hearts that Janet wouldn't have had to or just didn't work harder than Marie Osmond to attain the success that she has attained? Like, there weren't obstacles that Janet faced that Marie Osmond wouldn't have faced. I'm like, it is just wow. And it's egregious. Like, there was a black charts, guys. A black charts. Like, her team had to have a strategy to get from the black charts to the pop charts to mainstream TV. And what white band do you know that had to have a strategy to get from the black charts to the pop charts to mainstream TV? So don't talk to me about how her erasure after the Super Bowl or her snub by the Grammys and her being passed up for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame multiple times, despite being the first Black woman nominated for a Grammy in the rock category. Don't tell me none of those things had anything to do with her race. Like, you are excusing all sorts of intersections of oppression to come to that conclusion. And for especially any non-Black person to say that her Blackness didn't impact her career or affect her career, to me, you're saying that for you, her Blackness didn't impact her career. But ask her, and she would say differently. She has said differently. And it's disrespectful for you to project onto her this kind of like magical being, magical Negro, unaffected by race, unaffected by sexism. Especially if you're a fan and you're listening to her music. If you're listening to Janet Jackson's music, I don't know how you could come to that conclusion.
Okay. But see, now this is going to open up a whole nother discussion for me. You are correct. You can't whitewash it. And what I mean by whitewash it is it's done to a lot of Black figures, like Dr. Martin Luther King. They kind of just present him so that, okay, forget that he was Black. He was just a man who wanted to bring
He transcended race.
Yes.
He saw no color.
Right. But honestly, every time they was beating his tail, it was because he was Black.
It wasn't because he had transcended race.
Right. They were sicking dogs on his friend because he was Black. And so you have to acknowledge that, because Jesus had to beg for a year worth of promotion.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, don't wash Janet's Blackness away.
Exactly.
When you talk about a person's career and impact on charts, awards, don't talk about one piece of it and just wipe everything else under the rug. Talk about the whole, put it all on the table.
Yeah, she's a whole person. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, that's what frustrates me so much, is like, you cannot strip away this portion of it that you choose not to see. That is disrespectful. And I'm using that word intentionally because you are sanitizing someone's image so it's more palatable to you. And that is disrespectful. You are erasing her experiences of navigating systems that were built for her not to succeed, and just pretending like her success is just an inevitability when obviously it was not. Her failure was the inevitability, and the persistence, the patience, the wherewithal of her and her team to get beyond those obstacles is really what the testament should be. Like, you should be singing that from the mountaintops. And I don't want to say that I'm not trying to minimize other people's challenges. Everyone has challenges regardless of color or economic status or whatever. And I'm certainly not minimizing white people's struggles, although I'm going to tell you straight up that most of white people's struggles are due to white supremacy. I don't have time to go into that, but there are books available for you to expand your knowledge on that subject. But all people have obstacles and roadblocks in their paths to their dreams or just everyday life. But if your starting point in life is having to navigate some potholes, I get it. That's a challenge for you. But consider those whose starting point is they have to build the road. They don't even get to worry about the potholes until there's a path. And that's what they had to do. They having to create a path from the Black charts to the mainstream charts is an example of having to build the road. So what I'm saying is, if you're going to love Janet Jackson, you are loving a Black woman. So you need to love her Blackness. Otherwise, you are treating her like a token, like she's some sort of mascot, like she's a prop, like she's something to be created in your own image.
Now I want to expand on something else. See, this is not right. This is why we shouldn't have done this. Because I want to expand on something. Because, and I'm going to be real quick, but though, I think Jen also needs some props for something that a lot of people may not have looked at. Even though she dominated the quote unquote pop charts by first dominating the Black charts, she also was able to maintain both for decades. There's a lot of people, and I can name a couple of artists who were number one on the R&B, but then once they got that pop success, it wasn't so sweet after that. And they couldn't dominate on pop or R&B anymore, and then we never heard from them.
Yeah.
So also make sure we have to look at the fact that she was able to command both charts And if you want to put dance charts in there, you can. She was able to keep this legacy going. So I just want to put that
Despite the
tidbit in there.
obstacles, like there was so, and I'm just like, I get it. We want to celebrate people, and I know sometimes white people is hard to deal with race because you're just sick of hearing about it. And I just want to say, imagine how we feel.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Imagine how we feel. We don't just hear about it. Okay. We have to navigate this daily. The stories that I could tell you about navigating Blackness daily, the times that I have been concerned for my life simply because I showed up in the wrong place Black. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You worried about hearing about it. That is our experience. And that experience, though, those experiences, like the stories Janet tells about getting pulled over because they couldn't believe a Black woman was driving such an expensive car, or going into a shop and not being serviced until they recognize, like, oh, this ain't a regular Black lady. This is Janet Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Those experiences, good, bad, and different, colored the artists that we have today. And we don't get the knowledge. We don't get Rhythm Nation without those experiences of a Black woman
Mm-hmm.
and living her everyday experiences. So, whew. But thank you for letting me get that off my chest. I was stressed. It's Black History Month, and I don't want to be stressed like this.
Okay. But